Hello and welcome to this Convene Training and Resilience Community podcast. Today's guest is Mark Rivard. Mark is the owner and founder of Rivard Art Education, and he is also an artist. Before we get into our conversation with Mark, I'd like to play a video to introduce him. Let me bring that video up now.
I grew up in a ski and snowboard and skateboard background. I didn't go to art school. I didn't follow that particular path. During high school, I wanted to go on to be a pro skier. That was my only focus at the time. 2 weeks after I graduated, I packed up and moved to Colorado, tried to make it as a ski bum. I was skiing in Vail with some friends and jumped toward ACL, PCL, and meniscus in my left knee. So I ended up coming back home, moving back into my mother's basement. It was 6 months of being on the couch. I was completely bummed and depressed just sitting in my basement, and I was looking at my stack of old skateboards. Couldn't skate, couldn't ski, couldn't do anything, so I grabbed an old skateboard. I grabbed a Sharpie, and I started sketching the Minneapolis skyline. I think I drew something like 30-some skateboards in the first few months. I realized, wow, I just put together a body of work. Let's have an art show. We did a do-it-yourself art show. I was bartending at a nightclub. I talked the owner into letting me do an art show on a Wednesday night. I would jump back behind the bar and bartend at my own show, and we filled the place. It was awesome. I was really motivated, and I was like, okay, this is something I'm going to do. I'm going to make this art thing happen one way or another. I'm big on no limitations, that you can do anything you want in life. If you find something that you love, that you're into, stick to that thing. You're going to have a lot of failures. You're going to have a lot of people tell you can't do something, but prove them wrong. You know, I tattooed "one more run" across my arm. One more run is a phrase that we used to say when we were skiing. That was kind of a motivational thing. Like, we're not going to quit. You know, this isn't the last run. If you're tired, if you're getting beat down, if you don't think you can do it anymore, keep going. You know, you got one more in you. My name is Mark Rivard. I'm a skateboard artist. Where are you going to start?
Mark, welcome to the Convene Training and Resilience Community. Really happy to have you. That video was shot in 2011, so that's 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Blast from the past. Catch us up. What's happened since you started that journey?
Yeah, that thing is, that's a funny video. That was an interesting thing. So a little context to that video. In 2011, I was the face of Sharpie markers, so I was an endorsed artist for Sharpie based on my kind of early career of drawing and illustrating skateboards. I started a skateboard brand, and then because of this ad campaign that was with Sharpie that year, got a lot of a lot of exposure as an artist, and was doing a lot of marketing for the company, and ended up they kind of, I never really saw my story as this sort of inspirational tale like Sharpie viewed it, and they kind of created that little documentary and made it to sort of put a little Hollywood twist to it, gave it a little drama that I probably didn't recognize in my mind because it was just my life. And so because of that, I started getting invites to speak at schools and do a lot of, kind of come into the school, bring some skateboards, show my art, tell my story, talk about, how did I get into something as large as a international Sharpie ad campaign, and how does that happen? And in going into schools, I mean, I was a horrible student. I barely graduated high school, never bothered with college. But I started going into schools and meeting kids and doing a lot of work at schools, and just kind of having conversations with kids, and connected the dots and thought, started to look at how they were learning and what they were saying, and, how they felt about education just through the conversations, and saw a lot of myself in a lot of those kids. And so I started, thinking, why not do something more than just speak? Like, why can't I own a skateboard company. I'm going to bring skateboards next time, and you guys are going to draw them, my life is a result of telling stories on skateboards. So perhaps they can do the same. Why not? everything's in place. I have the infrastructure to actually do this. So I thought about it, and I just felt good about being in a school, about having the it felt really cool to use that platform, as kind of this Sharpie guy, to do something that just was a little bit bigger than just marketing a brand. I was really reaching kids at suddenly out of nowhere. I'm in education. So I branded Rivard Art Education as kind of an offshoot of my company, Rivard Art LLC. And I started doing a lot of work in schools, kind of writing curriculums. And before I knew it, I was doing 5-day artist in residence programs at schools where I would actually be taking over art rooms for a week. And then I got a gig where I actually took over for an art teacher at a high school and taught the Drawing 1 course for an entire semester. And from there, I really learned the ropes of what curriculum is and what's possible in education. And that summer of 2012, I branded the Rivard Art Education and really kind of structured it and never really sold it. It was sort of got word of mouth through the districts, and then in the Twin Cities area, it was just one thing led to another. And before I knew it, I was basically booked in schools constantly, whether I was speaking or teaching or whatever the case was. I just all of a sudden this kind of list of clients and through education just started to grow. And before I knew it, I was a full-time educator.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mark. And on that note, as far as going into schools, before we dig into the nuts and bolts of Rivard Art Education a little bit more, are you willing or would you go into schools in other states? I know Rivard Art Education is sort of a worldwide entity now, but if you've got, I know we have some folks tuning in from Austin, Texas today, and we have members in Florida and Colorado and Arizona. Will you accept invitations, short and or longer term opportunities in other states as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Half my year is on the road. I go down. I mean, I could go down and do something as I've traveled for, as something as small as a 2-hour seminar, all the way to let's do a full week-long project with an entire district where we work with 5 or 6 schools within a district, create a project where we're bringing kids into the community via an art show or something like that. I've done projects all over the world. I did a STEM project in Dubai. I spent a month at a school in Dubai working on a STEAM project. I wrote a curriculum which is based on illustrating skylines. So it works very, very well in terms of like the STEAM and STEM programming, which I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with. Travel is never a fear of mine. I'm all over the place. One of my biggest client is the Air Force. And so I go on tour every summer and do 10 bases worldwide. So travel, no problem. I love that.
Yeah, fantastic. So I know we have a number of folks who operate either homeless shelters or they serve people experiencing homelessness. And I think it'd be fascinating if you were ever able to hop into a shelter and do something like that. But we can hop into that a little bit later. As far as Rivard Art Education goes, as it exists now, sort of who is it for and what do you do?
Rivard Art Education started as working with local elementary through high school, essentially. Public schools, elementary through high school, private schools as well, kind of depending on figuring out, how does it work? What does it cost? Things like that. The early years, it was really just sort of individual project basis where I would maybe get a group of 20 kids and we'd spend a couple days drawing and kind of tell my story and developing that idea into more grandiose projects where now one of the things I do here in the Twin Cities when I'm home, I travel all summer on tour. Then when I'm home during the school year, I basically spend the entire school year working with multiple schools and organizations and finalizing that in an art exhibition that is all students. So all of the students that create skateboards with me over the course of a semester locally are then invited to participate in a gallery style opening night event. And I tend to make all of the kids very much a part of that process. So not only are we learning art, but we're talking about entrepreneurship, marketing, we're talking about positive uses of your social media. The students are involved in the design of the posters, the partnership with the gallery, seeing the nuts and bolts of what does it mean to be a creative professional versus just an artist. I think there's a huge disconnect between artists and the professional world. They don't know it's a tough thing to sell. It's a tough thing to establish a value of. So hopefully, that's kind of the goal is that we're doing more than just creative teaching. I mean, not only am I talking about technique and actual visual arts technique, but I'm also discussing then what do we do with it? How do you promote this? How do we create value with this, and where do we go with it? So yeah, locally, it all kind of culminates in one big art exhibition. And then every school and every organization I've ever worked with, it's all very different. You know, the students are different, budgets are different, the time frames, the needs, things like that. So it really starts with just a brainstorming conversation with a principal or an art teacher or whomever. We just jump on the phone and we'll say, okay, here's what we have available. This is how many students. This is kind of the need. This is the area that these kids are coming from, or kind of a little general background in terms of who you're working with. And knowing your audience is obviously hugely important. So yeah, it really, every program I've ever done has been completely different. The conversations are always changing. It's really pretty fun like that.
Yeah, and in terms of the types of students that you serve, can you talk a bit more about, I know you'll go into schools that serve higher risk students or students with behavioral disorders, special needs. Can you talk about that audience and both sort of how it works and how you serve them and some of the projects you'll do with that type of audience?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been, I've been doing this now regularly. I've been involved in education for 7 years or so. And I would say that just within the last 2 to 3 years, I've honed in well enough now that I feel very proficient in terms of what I understand about education and how to speak with kids, and understanding what works and what doesn't. And in doing that, I started to, over the years, I've worked with a number of kids with autism, things like that. I've worked in a lot of kind of level 4 high schools and things like that, where they'll some of these kids are in some pretty tough situations, whether it's in their control or out of their control, through special education, or whether it's autism or EBD or something like that. And it's been really fun because recently I've been getting booked really heavily into kind of the level 4 situations, and a lot of these districts that are completely focused on special education. And it's a blessing, really. It's really, really cool to kind of have that opportunity to work with those students, as well as just sort of, your general population of public school students. But how I got into it, I don't know. I mean, it just kind of fell. It's one of those things. It was a challenge, at first. I mean, I remember getting booked into my first school, and they explain to you what this is and what's a level 4, and kind of.
What is a level 4? Can you explain who it attends?
Yeah. So a level 4 school is what we would consider here in Minnesota. I think what the exact legal definition, I don't know if I would be able to recite that, but a level 4 school here is kind of like it's a school that services a lot of students that have pretty severe special needs or special educational needs, that don't necessarily work in a regular high school. Oftentimes it's behavioral, so a lot of these students have had the opportunity to be in a numerous amount of schools and just have been unsuccessful in those environments, and then brought into some of these a little more hands-on environments with the educators and so on. So I really don't think I have the perfect legal terminology of what that is. But yeah, it's like a lot of the schools that I work with, we just deal with a number of different behavioral needs, disorders, things like that. Sometimes all the way to the points where we have non-communicative skills, things like that, where there's nonverbal, everything from that level, that end of the spectrum, all the way through just simply behavioral problems, and this student, for whatever reason, isn't successful in a general public school.
Yeah, got it. So traditional education's not really working out.
Yep.
And so they're in this different type of environment. And so I'm actually curious, what type of projects are you doing with them, and what are you seeing in terms of their learning outcomes? I know you have you have the view of your projects, but you're doing this type of experimental art-based education.
Yeah.
Talk about those projects with those kind of higher needs kids and some of the outcomes that you're seeing.
Well, I'm a big believer that I'm not going to treat that student any different than I'm going to treat anybody else. Obviously, you have to you have to be respectful of what's possible, what's capable, what they have access to, things like that. But the one, last year I did a big project, and the big pitch to this was these students need to have the same opportunities as any other kid. And when I host this art exhibition at the end of the year, I want all of these students involved in this public art exhibition in a public gallery where their parents, their friends, their family, something that they can hold on to and be proud of and say, I'm a part of this. So you have to be completely aware and conscious of your audience as an educator when you're working, especially when you go through the doors of a level 4 school. You have to know your surroundings. You have to understand your audience. But there's no reason why that student doesn't deserve the same exact opportunity that this student over here at this, very wealthy neighborhood private high school has. So I try to not change my curriculum very much. The only thing I do differently is on my own, I've studied, how do we better connect with students with autism, for instance. So there is, from a technique standpoint, there's a little bit of, there's definitely a little bit that is different, just kind of slowing down what it is you're doing, slowing down and over-explaining something, which is very helpful with autism, being able to kind of break down what I might find to be obvious is sometimes not as easy of a solution or as easy as a point to get to for this student. So it's just awareness of your audience, but from the big picture, the goal of a project, the big picture hopeful takeaway from the students doesn't change. And I'm pretty proud of that. I think that's pretty interesting and really cool to have that where, I'm not treating anybody any differently here. Like I never view a student as a charity case. This is an opportunity, and you can take the opportunity or you can leave the opportunity. I oftentimes tell kids, any kid who works in my programs, being part of this program is an opportunity. It's up to you what you do with that opportunity. And I take that same approach from a level 4 high school all the way to any other high school in the world.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about your Rivard Art Education programs one by one. And for those tuning in live, you're welcome to type in a question if you have one. Otherwise, just continue to enjoy the conversation and learning more about Rivard Art Education and Mark's work. But Mark, we're sharing your website here. Yep. Let's talk about your programs one by one. Which one would you like to discuss first?
Well, the skateboard art stuff is that's kind of the basis for all of it. It started off as a visual arts program. I was I'm a professional artist. I still sell and create art and products based on my artwork regularly. So it started off because of that Sharpie video, that campaign with Sharpie, and my career as a visual artist. From that, I started to kind of create an experiential learning program that was based on visual art, but also using kind of the culture of skateboarding. So kids are smart. Like I think we don't give our students enough credit for how much they are in tune with culture, how hip they are to business, how much, this kind of entrepreneurial lifestyle is something that is very attractive to students. So I've kind of try and hone in on all of those sort of vibes when I'm teaching. Not only are we exercising visual art, but we're talking a lot about entrepreneurial emphases and things like that. So it started off as a visual arts program based in skateboarding and that kind of youth culture, youth and street culture, and then kind of bringing in the conversation of what is this? Outside of just drawing, what are we doing with it? Where does it go? What's the next step past just being a creative person? So then it's, Rivard Art Education has kind of morphed from a visual arts service. It's definitely an experiential learning visual arts concept. It also discusses a lot of entrepreneurial aspects. And from that, it's really kind of grown into this idea. I think I've built a model for curriculum that can be translated to multiple venues, into multiple different creative endeavors. For instance, now we've, just in the last couple of years, I've started a business called Stage Culinary. And Stage Culinary is essentially taking my model for teaching visual arts on skateboards and transitioning that into the kitchen. So I've spent many years working in restaurants and being heavily involved in the food and beverage world. I have a huge appreciation for the culinary arts, and it's something that, especially now in this day and age, I think food And the restaurant world has turned a corner to the point where it's now very cool. It's very hip. Kids get it. They see chefs on TV regularly. There's a whole new world of culinary arts. So now we've built a business called Stage Culinary. And what we do with Stage is very similar to the skateboard art thing. It's project-based learning, experiential-based learning. We bring students into restaurants to learn from chefs. Stage is a French term that represents kind of like an apprentice in a kitchen. When you stage at a restaurant, you're going in as an apprentice to that chef. So Stage Culinary is kind of a new concept, and it's been really, really cool. We've done some awesome programs where we brought high school kids in. They do restaurant takeovers. So they'll spend a whole semester, 1 day a week, going in and working with a chef and learning what is healthy eating, what is good food, where does it come from, how do we cook, the basics of all that, all the way up to the business of it. The kids are developing a menu. They sell tickets to the restaurant for their night of, and they sell out a restaurant for the night of their dinner. And it's a meal that has been completely developed in partnership with a chef that the kids have created. And it's really cool. I mean, we talk about kind of the creative side to cooking as well, like culturally, where does this come from? Is this a Thai dish? Is this a Jamaican dish? Is this a Mexican dish? And, let's look at the history of culinary arts as well. So Stage has been really, really cool. I could go on all day about that.
Yeah, and how do you find the kids how does one of the students get into Stage? Are they applying? Are you identifying them from some other source?
Yeah. It's been a lot of it. Actually, the last couple programs we've done, it has been sort of an application process. What I found is the kids are interested in cooking, and we don't have very good offerings for that inside the public school. So in your school day, you don't really get to have a culinary arts program. There might be a cooking course. There might be something that's about agriculture or something like this, but elevated culinary arts, I don't discredit kids. I think they're smart. I think they're hip. I think they get that. And when you give them the opportunity to be part of something that's elevated to that level, they're interested. So we end up, when we propose a project to a school, a lot of kids want to be a part of it. Obviously, we have to kind of cap off how many we can take into a restaurant on any given day. So we'll do an interview process, and we treat it just like a business. You are coming in to work on a job. And if you get this job, you're an apprentice for this particular chef for a number of months. And you have a goal. You have a business to run. And, so we interview, we try and determine who's serious, who's not, who is, tell us what you're bringing to the table. This is real world stuff. And there is a significant level of failure. This is a business. This restaurant has to be open. This is real food. It's real dollars. So if you're successful in this, what I love to do, one of my favorite parts of these programs is at the end, we sell out those tickets. The kids determine where our break-even point is. They understand how much money they've spent on the product itself. How much money does it take to open the restaurant for that night? So let's just say there's 50 seats in a restaurant. We have to sell 30 seats in order to break even. That covers our costs. Now, if you sell 50 seats, that's your profit margin. Those last 20 you're in the green. You're making money. What I do is I take that profit margin and I give it back to the kids as a bonus. If you finish one of my programs, you're going to get paid. So this is real world stuff. The restaurant has made what it needs to make. Staff is paid. The bills are paid. We created a great experience for our guests. Now you're running a business. And that is the coolest part about it. So they're learning culinary arts, and they're also kind of understanding how to establish value. What's my value? Is this worth it? Is this dish that we created worth an $80 ticket price? So it's super, super cool. Stage is something I'm really, really, really proud of right now. And, the sky's the limit with something like that. So just determining kids, it's really an interview process. We treat this very much like a business because it is a business.
So it sounds like Stage, it has legs in the sense that this is something you see essentially operating in perpetuity, that it's just a program of Rivard Art Education, and it's kind of a core part of your offerings and curriculum, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I have full intention of seeing Stage operating nationwide, worldwide. I think what we've done in terms of culinary arts in schools and in terms of talking and treating food in our schools is just terrible. I was in a high school yesterday, and I'm looking at the lunch dish of a couple of my students, and I mean, we can do better. And I think stage automatically, not only does it show that we can do better, not only is the food better, is the experience better, but the kids walk away from it understanding that they have a value. They have something to offer. They understand what it means to work. They understand what it means to be part of a team. There's so much more that we can do above and beyond just teaching kids to cook. So yeah, I think what we've created with Stage Culinary is absolutely kind of the next level of what food education, cooking education, things like that are going to look like in schools.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about both Stage and your other programming is that you're taking students or kids with this kind of creative interest and skill, but helping them also see the possibility of economic resilience, developing economic resilience in their lives. It's tough to get a job, and may become more increasingly tough to earn income that helps people support one another or support themselves and their families. And now they have marketable skills that they could use in a job, but that they might also use in their own business as an entrepreneur, as a side income source, and just how much that's needed. So I really admire that part of it.
Yeah. And that's one thing to add on to that, if I may, just to add on to that a little bit too, that I think with Rivard Art Education programs in general, whether it's a skateboard art project where you're going through the motions of creating an art show and exhibiting and marketing yourself that way, or a Stage Culinary project, many of my students have come back to me years later and said, could you write us a college recommendation letter? Or I used my skateboards as part of my portfolio to get into school. Our last Stage Culinary event, we had 3 of those students go on to get jobs at restaurants.
Wow.
It's like, these programs, education, I don't believe education should just be simply, you're going to learn it here and then good luck later. What you're doing there is work. You're working in school. You're working to better yourself. You're working to do all those things. So why can't we use the projects that you've done in your educational life for your future? So my hope is that any of the students that have done a Stage Culinary program or a Rivard Art Education program understand that this is tangible to your resume. It's something you can say you've done. It is part of what adds a value and a skill set to you as a person. So, I think all education should be like that. I mean, we ask on a resume or on a application, what level of education do you have? You should be able to answer that question with a certain amount of confidence.
Well, it's like this concept that the best resume is a project of value that you've worked on. They have something that is their resume and serves that, as opposed to how do I write this in a way or frame my skills in a way. They don't even have to necessarily do that. They can just show them. They have tangible examples. And so I'm curious, Mark, with our final handful of minutes here, is what's an unexplained territory or area where you'd like to create a curriculum, but maybe haven't found the right type of partner or the right type of area that lends itself well to this kind of project-based or experience-based education curriculum?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's the golden ticket, really. It's there's a lot of areas. Like, for instance, I speak with kids all the time, and I'm asking them constantly, "What are you interested in? What do you see yourself doing?" I had a really interesting conversation with BuzzFeed, and a lot of kids are talking about coding. I mean, there's going to be a huge job opportunity for this in their future. So for instance, if I could create a model curriculum based on what I've created already, this kind of take any creative field or any skill set really and plug it into this model of curriculum and see that happen. For instance, if I was to work with BuzzFeed, I would say, let's take 6 students, let's learn coding from your experts, and then let's create a project that's actually going to end up on your websites, on your social medias that these kids have coded, if I'm saying that right. I know nothing about computers, but that's an example. I mean, that's an area I know nothing about, but I think I've built a model of curriculum that I could plug the right professionals into and the right students into and have a very successful program. So coding is an interesting one. I can see agencies and marketing and things like this. Here in Minneapolis, I'm sitting in Minneapolis right now. We are a hub of marketing agencies. There's a ton of creative ad firms and things like this. Kids are viewing ads and viewing marketing efforts every single day. We all do it. Everywhere you look, you're looking at some form of marketing. So let's teach why and how and what this looks like. What is the nuts and bolts of that? How do we get the kids into these agencies? I think there's room to build curriculum there. So many things. I mean, literally, it could be anything. I kind of, personally, I like to focus on creative-based things. It's my world. I understand it better. Whether it's my craft or not, from a creative standpoint, I think, I'm just far more familiar with that type of thing. But I've even had a bank, very large bank, that has asked if I could come up with some way to make finance cool. How do we teach finance? Make it cool, make it sexy. That's freaking hard. I mean, to get a kid to be interested in finance, that is, and to find finance to be cool, it's necessary. It's absolutely a valuable skill set. It's something that all of our students should be learning to some degree. But how do we make it cool educationally? Very, very tough. I have some ideas, but I've had partnerships with some pretty large banks, and they always pose the same question. We want to get involved in education. How do we make finance cool? I have ideas for that. I think that's interesting, but it's also kind of, again, that gets a little bit away from the creative side of things. But all things creatively, in order to be successful, will deal with a certain amount of finance. So, like with Stage, for example, one idea I have, which I'm going to be proposing to a local bank here, is it costs X amount of dollars to do this, to operate this restaurant, to create this event, the marketing, the food cost, the insurance that needs to be paid, the bills, all that stuff. So let's take a bank, for example, if they want to have a program in finance, let's take a credit card or a debit card that is the Stage culinary card for this program, and we have $20,000 plugged into that account. Now, it's up to the students to manage that money to create their product and their service and their event. So they have a nest egg started. Now, let's see where you end up at the end. Did you make money on that? Did you lose money? You have this nest egg. And that was a good way for a bank to get involved in teaching finance. I mean, that's a great way for the students to learn, how does this work?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think the couple things come to mind just as you've been talking is that your model of education feels a lot like what could be the new type of internship.
Yeah.
So apprenticeships are essentially rising, and that's kind of the concept behind Stage. You mentioned you're essentially an apprentice of a chef, or that's the historical context behind the term, but that is, apprenticeships are rising in significance. And I've seen research that with Gen Z, the group of kids kind of coming out of high school and moving into that next phase of adulthood, that a number of entities are now wanting to start internships in high school because these kids come out skilled, competent, and ready. And I wonder if another interesting area around the coding piece of things would be a project around artificial intelligence. Could be fascinating. That if you developed a curriculum that, with BuzzFeed, it shows up on a website and, more traditional coding environments, but that with artificial intelligence rising, that's like another really tangible area that is also could be creative and artistic in its implementation or execution.
Yeah,
that's cool.
For sure. Yeah, imagine, you could go so big with something like that, because imagine, for instance, and I also totally agree, apprenticeships, things like that on a high school level are so important. Less and less kids are, in my opinion, I don't know if I have the financial or the numbers to back this, but just from what I see, who I talk to, so many kids are less and less interested in going to college. They're not interested in the debt. They're not interested in that lifestyle anymore. Things have changed. And so they still need to get skill sets. You still need to be an educated person. You still need to be a professional. You have to learn that somewhere. So many things. Imagine a program where all of the students are going to come together to build a house. So we're going to have students that are learning carpentry. We're going to have students that are learning architecture. They need to design blueprints. Interior design can be brought in. So many facets of this of business could be brought into one project, where all of these students get to kind of determine what's your interest. Now let's plug that into a project where we're all going to have to work together and come up with a result. So
let's shift gears here as we close, or you're welcome to share any final comments you want on Rivard Art Education, and then I'd like to talk about some of your personal art projects and what you're working on personally as well. So any final comments about Rivard Art Education, or you feel like we've covered that reasonably well?
I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, it's kind of something that I can see I'm going to grow like crazy. I mean, it's a project that I'm extremely passionate about. It's the work, just being involved in education is kind of really crazy to me. I never in a million years thought I'd be doing that, but it's amazing. It feels very, very good to have the opportunity to kind of work with students and to see where they go. I mean, now I've been doing it enough years now where I've actually have students that are adults that work in different fields to see the results of that and see kids in the adult world now, it's unbelievable. It's such a weird thing to, see one of my students working somewhere that I had 7 years ago and go, wow, you're a professional now. That's awesome. I mean, amazing. So yeah, if anybody ever wants to talk Rivard Art Education project-wise, I've got ideas for days. I'm always looking at booking unique projects. Let's come up with an idea and let's make it awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And so now I shifted over to share the homepage of your markrivardart.com website, which we can scroll through and take a look at some of this. So what are you working on personally on the personal art side?
Yeah. It's I just had this conversation the other night. I'm just stoked on it too, because art-wise, it changes so much for me. I started off hand illustrating skateboards, and I was really, all about kind of like really the technique of drawing and proving that I was technically a sound artist. And now I find art to be it's less of I don't put a lot of pressure on it anymore. I don't feel like I have to prove myself anymore. So it's gone from something I was very, very, very involved in to a point where I felt like I had to prove that my career as an artist to now I think my place in this world as a professional is elsewhere, and it's been fun to just kind of relax now, enjoy the process of making art, like enjoy what, really be excited about the art I'm making versus making art that I think fits a market. It's huge. That's a big thing to be able to go back to just personally making the art I want to make. It's fun because with starting Stage Culinary, I have created, I'm working on a whole new series of art that's called the Food and Beverage series, where I'm literally making paintings of racks of lamb and enjoying it. Really, it's like, it's what are you interested in? The best art's going to come out of you being personally excited about it. So, I find myself drawing a lot of food related things and paintings that are kind of based in this food world. So it's been cool. It's so fun to just be involved with it. And then traveling so much when I'm on tour all summer, I'm shooting photos like crazy. And now I want to start creating kind of more content-based stuff. So I'm taking pictures and doing a lot of writing and things like that. Honestly, writing is, I think, my favorite of all of the artistic mediums. I think it's the most potent. I think it has the most value to history. Being able to kind of leave the information and accurately depict historically in 1,000 years, if we 1,000 years, what did it look like 1,000 years ago? And I think writing is going to be kind of the main frame for what people will still be able to understand. Artistically, man, it's fun. I'm just hanging out, having a blast with what I'm making, and still being able to go in and draw on skateboards with kids. Every single day I get to go back to my roots. Every class I walk into, I'm still drawing on skateboards with kids. So, it's fun. It's super full circle now where it's no pressure at all for me artistically. I don't have to prove anything anymore. It's great.
It is great. Well, Mark, I want to thank you so much for your time today sharing about Rivard Art Education. I've pulled up on your website here where people can contact you to schedule a project. markrivardart.com for your personal art, but otherwise rivardarteducation.com to learn more about that and connect with you there. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And thanks, man.